I have the ability,
Sorry, go ahead.
I have the gift of vision. So I have the ability to tune into people's subconscious minds and bring what's ready to come to the surface for them through their thoughts or energetically. And we clear that to create a path where we walk through that wall of fear. And on the other side of that is freedom. So I love what I do. I work with people all over the world. I've worked with CEOs. I've worked with other coaches. And the thing about it is, as I'm sure Elizabeth can attest, that even like my clients in China, energy knows no bounds. So it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. I'm able to tune in and to help people shift in a pretty remarkable and dramatic way. So I really love what I do. I have tremendous passion for what I do. So Linda, I don't know if you had questions for me or.
I'm trying, oh, there. I was trying to unmute. I thought we would use the questions that you sent over with your podcast.
Sure.
So let me go find that. Do you know those? Do you have those questions by heart, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, those were just suggestions for you.
Oh,
I didn't know if you had other questions. If you want me to refer to those, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, those are perfect. So the first,
and I'm also very open to whatever questions others have. So
I feel like as we dive more into it, people will have organically more questions. But how does your mentoring different from mainstream coaching and therapy? Let's talk about how you're different.
Sure. So how I'm different is the gift of vision allows me to really hone in very quickly to see what the issues are that are holding people back. And having worked with energy for as many years as I have, I'm also able to release that energy. So how that differs from therapy, and most of my clients tell me this, oh my gosh, this would have taken me a year's worth of therapy. Not that there's anything wrong with therapists, you know, you're drawn to who you're drawn to, but we're able to quickly shift through those issues. We don't spend a lot of time. So I might see things that have happened, and I often do, in people's childhoods. And I'll bring that to the surface. I say, oh, you were affected by ABC. So we don't spend a lot of time talking about that. We bring it to the surface and we release it. So people have more balance and clarity in their lives. And of course, we as humans, we are a layering process. We carry our energy down to the cellular level. That's where our energy begins. And so I liken it to thunder and lightning. So I'm the lightning that comes in and goes, and then it takes a while for the thunder to come through, which is like my client's body's starting to release all of this. But we start the process of that, and the release can happen either immediately or it might take a few days. It depends on the person. So energetically, I'm not grabbing someone by the shoulders and saying, hey, let this go. It's like, wow,
well, that's good.
yeah, this is what's going on. Let's release this. And so, I mean, 10 times out of 10 times, I want to release that. And when you start sharing truth with people, at first they want to go in their head and say, how could she know that? How could she know that? Right. And then as more truth comes up, which is the layering that I'm talking about, they start getting into it more. So I work with heart set and mindset. And that's one of the other differences. And thoughts are the characteristics of the mind, and feelings are the characteristics of the heart. And you can't really separate them. So people, when I work and I start them in a process of being in their hearts, and most people are really afraid to go there. It's a very vulnerable place to go. So they will all of us will dip in and, oh, I love my spouse, I love my partner, I love my children, I love my friends, I love my family. And then they bounce back out and go into their heads. And in the work that I do, and I know when they're in their heads and I know when they're in their hearts, but in the heart, I teach people the power of that vulnerability and that they can use the heart as a tool to guide them in different areas. So that's where your intuition is, that's where your truth is, and you use your mind for other things. So we get to a point in the process of working together where we decide, okay, is this a time where I want to use my mind or I want to use my heart instead of constantly going up here?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And so it says here, how have your clients prospered from your mentoring?
So how my clients prosper is they wake
That's
up.
financial stuff? Is it like personal stuff? Like, is it all of it?
It can often be business related. I don't dip into the financial part of it, but I certainly dip into the emotional connection to that. So
Okay.
I'm not telling people what to do with their finances.
Okay.
That's left up to someone like you, apparently, who does this to help people.
Yeah.
But I help them in their businesses and I help them in their personal lives. It just depends on what's coming up for them and what needs to be addressed. But big shifts happen, and becoming much more aware of the thoughts that you have. And most people are not aware of what's going around and around in their subconscious mind. And when you start bringing that up, saying, hey, this is going around and around all day long, it's like, oh my gosh, they want to stop that. They want to shift into another way. So that's why I work with both mindset and heart set. And I see a person as a whole being. And why wouldn't you want to use your whole being?
Right. And why wouldn't you want to release something from your past that's only holding you back, that's only hindering you from being successful now? Why wouldn't you want to let that go? And I think a lot of people get stuck on the idea that letting it go is somehow saying what happened was okay or right. And that's not what we're saying. We're just saying we don't want to carry it anymore. We don't want to be
That's
angry
right.
about this anymore. We want to let it go because it's not serving us. And it's still wrong. It's still not right, but we don't have to be angry about it anymore. We're going to release our attachment to it.
So we release the energy around it. And part of the beauty of that is, one, the awareness, but you raise your energy vibration. I mean, think about it. Every word you say has an energy connection to it. I was sharing this with a client yesterday, and I think it's so appropriate. If you guys can read that, I love this. This is an Einstein quote. And the point is, most people don't see their lives from an energetic perspective.
Right.
And when you start seeing it in those terms, you see energy coming at you, maybe from another person, or from a situation that you're in, where it's either two-dimensional versus as like on paper, maybe finances or whatever it is, or reading a book. I mean, everything has an energy vibration attached to it. And so once people start opening to that, they see how, oh my gosh, my energy, I'm not drawn to that. I don't want that in my life. And that's part of the awareness that I teach people. And it's wonderful.
Yeah. And you know what? If this is like new information to you, something that you're familiar with that will draw you in is, I remember as a science teacher, I built radios in my classrooms. And as you turn the dial, you would get a different frequency and you would hear a different radio station.
Exactly the same thing.
And so I was showing them, we couldn't see any of the frequencies, they're all invisible to the eye, but the instrument helped us hear a certain frequency. So it's not such a big stretch to think that it's not just radio waves that have frequencies and light waves that have frequencies, but the reality is that everything has some kind of frequency.
Well,
And
we're all walking energy fields. I mean,
yeah,
that's scientifically proven.
yeah,
And it's like, how am I able to get on my cell phone? And I was talking about this a few minutes ago. How am I able to tune into somebody on the other side of the planet? How are you able to get on your cell phone and talk to somebody on the other side of the planet? It's all energy. It's all waves. And we vibrate in these different places. But it is within us to shift that vibration.
yeah. And it's within us to turn it off and have silence if that's a mistake. But people do that as a coping mechanism. They shut off things inside them and they ignore them or bury them.
Yes, so they'll shut down, but in the process of shutting down, they're blocking energy that needs to come up and out. So I call it the garbage lid. It's like, oh, something emotional is coming up and I don't want to deal with that. So I'm just going to put the lid on it.
Right.
And so talking a few minutes ago about childhood things that come up, it's like, no, I don't want to think that. I don't want to feel that. Boom. I'm going to just, and then what happens is that manifests itself both mentally and physically in the body. I'm not going to go down that road, but believe me, it's a big part of, I mean, we are whole beings. You can't just separate your thoughts from the rest of your body. It's impossible.
Yeah, it shows up. Right. Exactly. Like I've seen people who had terrible pain in the neck and it's tied to like unforgiveness. And when they release that, all of a sudden their neck is feeling better because
Right.
what really they were doing was holding on to the anger of a moment in their life that they were frustrated with. And when they decided not to be angry anymore and just to release it, then all of a sudden, all those tight muscles in their necks started to unknot. And
Right.
within a very short period of time, it was like mobility, pain, all this stuff is shifted for them from just
Yeah,
letting
and they
go
can
of one
actually feel
moment.
it reverberate out of their bodies. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
It's show stopping.
Yeah. I've done it with my own eyes.
I have
That
not.
really, yeah.
I'm not you.
Yeah. So I'm happy to answer any questions that someone might have, or unless you have some other questions for me, Linda.
Does anybody have a question? Has anybody had an experience? We'll start there with some sort of energy work. Has anybody done anything energy wise, whether it's Reiki or crystals? All right, Elizabeth, you're a regular.
Oh, no, haven't done that at all.
Okay.
That's interesting.
What about you, Elizabeth? Have you done anything?
Yes, in fact. So I got interested in Reiki several years ago, partially because I just knew somebody well who was a Reiki master. And, the more she talked about it, the more it resonated with me as something I wanted to know more about. But I also really have experienced how Reiki can release trauma that we've stored in our bodies, just like you were talking about, Linda, where it has manifested itself in some sort of physical ailment or pain. There's a lot of research that shows that we do store trauma in our bodies, and it can really impact our health and our emotional wellness and, our success in life. So releasing that through, connecting with an energy healer who can detect where that trauma is stored and where the energy is stuck and helping release it is, extremely powerful. And, I think that it's one of these things that it sounds woo-woo, but it is, we do all have energy, and so does everything else on the planet. And if you can get on board with the fact that, we have energy and we can connect with other people's energy, I think you can explore all sorts of energy work. And one thing people have asked me historically is like, is Reiki, religious? Is it compatible with different religions? Things like that. Is crystal healing, is this stuff like a cult or something like that? And, I really want to be reassuring to people that Reiki is not a religious practice, and that this kind of energy healing is available to anybody, no matter what your belief system. And in fact, there's a lot of energy healing that goes on in the Bible, if you think about it. So, and there's mention of crystals in the Bible several times and their power. So I think it's really cool thinking about how this has been used throughout the centuries, even if it maybe wasn't called energy work.
And I'd like to just address what Elizabeth was saying about woo, because people kind of want to do this. It's like, oh no, that's too woo. Well, they say woo woo, but it's kind of been shortened of late to woo. And what's fascinating is there's article after article of corporations starting to bring this in because they see the power of it. And what their goal is to improve sales, improve productivity, and
Improve the
is
culture.
part of that. I mean, we are walking energy fields. So it's like, okay, there's way too much science behind this now and the effects that it has on the human body to ignore it.
You know, I want to remind everybody there was a time when chiropractors were thought of as ridiculous and acupuncturists were thought of as ridiculous. Herbal medicine was thought of as ridiculous. So, I mean, every time our eyes are open to something, the newness brings about a resistance. You know, we're like, we're not sure about the new thing. We don't understand the new thing. But what I would recommend is when you encounter a new thing is to just be inquisitive, just to try to understand it, just to learn about it. You don't have to jump in with 2 feet if you're not ready. That's okay. But come to meetings like this, hear the testimonies of people. My experience was I had a girlfriend who was in an abusive marriage, and the worst fight was he had her by the throat and he was choking her, so she couldn't speak, and it was very frightening. Years later, she was always going to the chiropractor to have her neck adjusted. When she got very nervous, she would get jammed up and lose her words. She couldn't advocate for herself, and she always tied it back to how angry and hurt she was from that moment in her life. I mean, it went straight line in her brain that's what was wrong. And so when she finally released that, I saw with my own eyes how, first of all, her neck stopped hurting, the headaches went away, her verbal acuity grew exponentially. Like, I saw the metamorphosis, and I was thankful for it because she was a wonderful person the whole time. And I was sorry that this one moment in her life was jamming her up. And I was happy that she let it go. And the key thing she was saying to me is, I didn't want to let it go before because I thought it was saying it was okay, I somehow deserved it, or I was wrong. And it was none of those things. She was not, by releasing it, she was not saying it was okay or right at all. She was just saying, I'm tired of being angry about this. I'm tired of being hurt about this. I'm going to let it go and use my thoughts and mind in a different direction, just release it. So I just wanted to say that twice, because a lot of times people think that letting something go or forgiving somebody is some sort of acceptance or tolerance or approval. And it's definitely not any of those things.
Right.
Do you agree with that, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. That's sort of the outcome part that you're talking about. In my line of work, as I tell my clients, I get out of the way because the information comes through me, being the intuitive psychic. We don't use the word psychic anymore. It's now intuitive. And I love to share this one story because it's what comes through are visions and words, and people really hold on to the vision because it's a story about them. And my son is now 27, but I love this story. When he was 4 months old, I was holding him, in love with my baby, rocking him in the kitchen, and I get downloads all the time. And this download was a super powerful one, and the words came through, and the simplest words are the best. Your son will be a man of God. And I was like, okay. And when he was 10, he came to me and he says, Mommy, I do not believe in God and I do not want to go to church. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because this message that I got, and all my messages are very accurate and true. And I had to think about that. It's like, well, why did God bring me? Why is this child in my life? Why is this my baby? So I had to think about it for a few days. And it was because you are teaching him to be an independent thinker, and you can't force a relationship on someone to have a relationship with God. That's their own path. So when he was in college, he was a junior in college. It was October. I'll never forget it. And I got a call from him, and his voice sounded really funny. And he said, "Mom, God has called me to serve." And I was like, "Oh, there it is." And he's now a pastor. So I have so many stories about this, but to be able to open oneself, which I have done more and more and more, and to be able to share those truths with people, and to just honestly just get out of the way to let them see, is, I can't tell you how powerful that is. It's life-changing for people. It's just life-changing. And then sharing the kind of information that comes through me, and then also being able to affect the energetic release of that, which is what everyone was talking about, is really powerful. It's life-changing stuff. It's life-changing.
I know it's wonderful when it's allowed and played out, I think.
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the call. I see you jumped on a little bit late. Have you had any experience with energy work, Sarah?
Have not.
Okay. Do you have any questions about it?
No, it's a fascinating. So, as a matter of fact, this is the first time I've really ever been exposed to anyone who does that kind of work. So this is really kind of my first experience hearing about it, and so it's been very fascinating to me.
Well, I know you've done things with mindset, that you're very
Yes.
open to that. And so I feel like this is just another step in the evolution of that, is getting heart reset stuff going on, to get the emotions in line with the thoughts.
Mhm.
And one of the things that Lauren said earlier is that they actually are hard to separate. We like to separate them because, we like to dissect everything. That's the human way, right? But the reality is there's such a tie between the two that it's actually hard to separate. Wouldn't you say that? Didn't you say that earlier, Lauren?
Yeah. And it's great that you brought that up, Linda, because people do an amazing job of just cutting themselves off and just living here, versus being brave enough to go into the heart and going past some of that vulnerability and releasing these walls of fear. That's where we carry it, we carry that fear emotionally. And when we hear truth, those walls dissipate, and you step over the threshold into freedom, into that higher vibration. And as I said earlier, you want to use your whole being. You want to. You don't want to say, "Oh no, that's too vulnerable. I have more power up here." It's like, now that vulnerability is incredibly powerful, and you find amazing depth from within. So you take the mindset stuff, which I love. I work in mindset, but the heart set, that's the keys to the kingdom, honestly. I mean, that's where you connect with God or the universe, whatever you want to call that. And it's the part of you that it's your soul.
It's your essence, right?
And it's your
The core
essence.
of who you are.
And it's like, the depth is just sitting there waiting for you to tap into it. It's really the truth of it. And then once you do, and just like the Bible says, the truth will set you free, and it does.
Yeah.
You have to be brave enough to walk through the fear of it. without judging yourself. That's a big part of the work I do as well. Because when you're in your heart, there is no judgment. When you're up here, that's where the critical thinking is, and judge, judge, judge. Judge yourself, judge others. Use that to prevent you from moving forward with something in your life. And when you are able to go into your heart and feel the emotion and say, okay, I'm struggling, I have this fear, but I still want to move forward. Let's move you forward and into action. There's so much beauty in that.
You know, and it's funny, we were talking about separating the head from the heart. I also know people who live in the emotion, and that's why they make a lot of emotional purchases. They emotionally eat, they emotionally binge on things because they shut off their head and just live in their emotions. And that is actually just as deprecating as living in your head. That the partnership, I think, that she's talking about today, about having your mind and your heart, the connection, is really important to living a full life. Because when we shut any one part off, we deal with the consequences of that. Because we can look around us. Everybody knows somebody who's an emotional eater or an emotional shopper, an emotional something. And that's because they're not thinking anymore. They don't want to have any more thoughts. They just want to eat good food and taste wonderful things and focus on, you know, stuffing their emotions, right? So I think,
yeah, but there is mindset is attached to that, because the subconscious mind is telling them, oh, eat this.
feel better.
Absolutely. So I hear what you're saying, that people live in an emotional state, but until you start opening this and then opening this to say, okay, here we go.
Partnership. Yeah.
It's a partnership, and somebody who's an emotional eater or bulimic or whatever their issue is, definitely have to change a mindset along with addressing the emotion and releasing energy around that. They're both
Important.
you have to work in partnership with both of them. That's what I think, and that's what I do.
Wonderful. Yes, Tam.
Oh, you asked if anybody did Reiki. I did do Reiki at the beginning of when I became stage 4, and I did have a clogged liver, and she used the crystal, and she taught me how to do Reiki. And by the time we were done with sessions, everything was clear. And she couldn't stop the stone from spinning so fast. She said that wasn't even funny. From being not moving to spinning out of control, she said everything just released. But Lauren, I have to say thank you for thinking of the whole person, not just the problem. Like many doctors
Absolutely.
do the same thing. They just think of the one, your cancer, let's say, and not the person.
Right.
So I'm glad you think of the person first
Mhm.
and stuff, because that's really good. But Reiki, I swear by Reiki. It helped me get my energy flowing, and I knew where the energy was stuck. And I told her, left side liver area, and she goes, "That's exactly where you're stuck." Because I'm
You
kind
listen
of
to
like,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm kind of intuitive too. So I knew exactly what was going on. I just needed somebody to unstick it, because I couldn't unstick it, and I tried, but it wouldn't work. So, but it does. Reiki, I swear by it. So
Good for you, Taz. That's great.
Yeah. And something Tammy always says that I absolutely love, it's my favorite line. She says, I have cancer, but cancer doesn't have me. And
that's awesome.
really separating out the situation from her person, you know what I mean? And I love when she says that. It's so empowering in my opinion.
Definitely.
I have a
So-
question.
Great.
So one thing I know I struggle with sometimes as somebody who works with energy is how to take care of myself, because often when you're, helping somebody else release stuck energy, negative energy, painful memories, whatever it is, you can take it into yourself. And I'm just wondering what kind of self-care you do, Lauren, or if you experience any of that kind of transference of energy when you work with people.
Yeah, good question. I don't take any of it on. I truly don't. It's not mine to own. So even though I'm shifting the energy through the process of creating awareness for my clients, I am very clear that that is not mine to take on. And the self-care is really starts from deep within anybody who is an empath. Like I work with empaths that, oh my gosh, I'm being affected by this and being affected by that. And it's like, well, let's go within. Let's voyage within you and see why that's happening.
Yeah.
And most times it's because people don't love themselves first. They just don't love themselves. And so it's as though, and something to be careful about, Elizabeth, you don't want to become the sacrificial lamb to somebody else's energy. So you are a walking energy field. You're able to work with other people's energy, but whether it's on the phone or in person, it's like done. That does not enter my energy field. So if you imagine, this is a good way to remember this, and I love visuals, driving your car and you have a windshield. Well, why do you have a windshield? To stop the intense wind. What if you're going 70 miles down the freeway and you don't have a windshield? It's so intense, right? So the windshield, just like energy, it goes up and over. That's how you start looking at it. You don't want to, you become very intentional of not taking it on. So as I shared earlier, I do get out of the way and let this come through me. And I'm very clear that it's not mine to own. I don't share other people's experiences. I might share them anonymously, certainly don't attach a name to it, but I had somebody come to me years ago and say, wow, if I go to a party and all these people are there and I'm just picking up everything that they're saying, and I just, well, don't. Just tell yourself, just cut it off, shut it off. And part of how I look at it also is, it's none of my damn business. Unless I'm invited in, I don't go. And I don't care who it is. I have plenty of friends. I never tune into them unless maybe something's coming up and they invite me in. And then in the process of that, I go to a place where I'm really shielded. I love myself. I love the gift that I have. I love the power of that gift. And I can go on and on about how amazing that gift is, but I'm also really clear that I'm over here and it just comes through me. So I can speak about it without ego because it's not me. So I don't know if that helps you to start making that discernment that, oh, I want to help somebody energetically and just be really intentional. Well, I'll pull some of that energy off, but I'm not going to take on your energy. It's not mine. It's yours. And you release it, but you don't release it within.
And so, Elizabeth, it looks like Lauren is really good at defining her boundaries. If you want to physically do something to help you get your head around it, I know that I can be in the car, I put my hands out as far as they can reach, and I pull my hands into myself. And when I'm doing that in my head, I'm pulling in my energy field so that when I go into a place, I've sort of created in my brain a boundary around myself so that I don't hang out like an octopus with tentacles, tapping into everybody's stuff and being like a bull in a china shop. I'm composed, I'm centered, I'm present, but I do something physical to help me rein myself in and be centered. It seems like Lauren is very easily, like that's just intuitive to her. That's a natural inclination for her. The way some people can play a piano and other people have to practice for a lot of time. We all can play at the end though. So, I mean, for us, maybe we need to focus on those boundaries that are around us and pull ourselves in so that when we go into situations, we have a real beginning and end as opposed to just tissue in the wind kind of a
So
feel.
here's a really good exercise to do, Elizabeth. And imagine that you're looking down on yourself, a bird's eye view, and you are this point. And the diameter around you The diameter is about 8 feet. So we know scientifically that your energy field goes out about 4 feet all around. And it actually goes out 8 feet, but the core of it's really around 4 feet out. And you can say, okay, Elizabeth, I'm looking at you. Oh, here comes another point with their energy field. Boing, boing. You can create a buffer around your energy field. And it's like, well, I'm not going to start off by doing that with a client that comes in. I'm going to be in the grocery store and I'm going to become really aware of my energy. And the person pushing their cart in the opposite direction towards me. And I'm going to start playing with it and say, you're not changing their energy. You're just not letting it come through. So you start using it in these simple ways. So it's like a muscle. You just start developing that. And the car is a really good place to, if you're typically the only driver of your car.
Yeah, that's why I picked that, because
Put your energy field in that car and just start infusing it to the point where your energy field, when you open the door to your car and you get in, it's like, oh, thank you, because you've already established that. It's kind of like a Tibetan monk. If you ever enter a room where Tibetan monks have been meditating, you just go, whoa, you can barely handle all the energy, right? Well, what have they done? So you start thinking of yourself in those terms and see the power of what you do and create that shield around yourself. And again, you just start off in simple ways, but as you have awareness around this, when you are working with your clients, you're going to know, you'll know.
Yeah, and that's a really excellent point. If nobody's ever gone into a Tibetan monk temple, they have one in New York City, they purposely come together and do the opposite. Instead of reining themselves in, they try to glow like a light bulb. They come together in masses and all try to glow and push out their energy and create a wave.
Push out, and that energy.
That's why when you walk in the room,
love.
It hits you like air. Have you ever been outside in a hot day and you walk into an air conditioned room and the cool air just hits you and you're like, oh, I love air conditioning. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it's almost like that energetically. As soon as she said that, my mind went right back to that moment. When you walk into that room, it's like a wave that comes over you. But we're asking you
wave
to
of love.
Sure. Instead of glowing, we're asking you to pull it in. So you put your hands out. Now you have a visual image, and then you pull it in, and it's a cue to your brain to pull it in, to create a boundary that you fit in, but that's a buffer for you. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because I use lots of different crystals to create boundaries and protection, like black tourmaline, for example, shungite. And those are really helpful. Mm-hmm. But there's also, I think,
but your mind is the most,
as you said, right? Exactly. It's the most powerful tool. And I think as an empath and as somebody whose background is in social work and counseling, I've always been taking in other people's stuff. And one of the things I've had to learn is how to not carry it in my own body. But I'm still working on it. And so appreciate these suggestions, because I'm always looking for new ways to, expand my own mindset about how to look after myself so I can look after other people.
Yeah. And it's funny because as a young girl, I was a school teacher in Brooklyn, in a very poor neighborhood. Very poor, like 98% of the kids were in foster care. Very few kids even had one parent, right? And they all had these horror stories, and they'd sit in your lap and they'd tell you their stories. And I was crying, literally. I washed my face in my tears on the way home from work every day, because my heart just broke for these kids, because what I was doing was pulling all their sadness and all their pain into me, right? And my friend said, you're going to lose your mind if you don't figure out how to handle this situation differently, because you have to show up for those kids, but you can't take on that stuff, Linda. That will destroy you. And so it was almost like, if I didn't learn how to do this, my whole mental sanity hung in the balance, kind of a thing, because who doesn't love a kid and who doesn't want to be there for a kid? And there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't lose yourself in the process. You have to have that boundary. It's critical to your own survival. Does that make sense? It was very dramatic. That's how come as soon as you started talking, I thought totally relate to what you're talking about. Totally
Oh
get it.
yeah. I mean, when I was a young social worker and working with people in
Yeah,
really
you know what I'm
dire
talking about, right?
circumstances, it was really hard. You know, I hadn't learned yet how to not carry everybody else's pain. So again, it's a process, and I feel like it's a lifelong process. So
100%. But I do know that before I walk into a crowded room in my car, before I even leave, I take a minute to rein myself in, and that really contributes to my composure as I walk into events. And Sarah Phillips will tell you, I network like you wouldn't believe. So I mean, she knows. People invite me to things and they say, raise your hand if you know Linda, and everyone in the room raises their hand. So I do love to meet people and talk to people and connect with people. I delight in it, but it's so much more pleasurable now that my boundary is in place. It's less overwhelming. It's less daunting. I feel mentally and emotionally prepared to enter the room, and I'm bringing my A game because I'm composed and I'm centered. So it really does help me, or else I wouldn't have wasted this many minutes talking about it, because I do think Lauren's time with us is very precious. But as soon as I heard what you were saying, I had to tell you my experience because it's been so helpful to me.
I really appreciate it, Linda. Thank you. And thank you, Lauren, as well.
Oh,
You
yeah.
bet.
The world is better because Lauren's in it. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have huge passion for what I do. I love
Well, you know
people
what?
saying, oh, I do want to change my life.
Well, or they feel ready, you know?
Yeah.
you can be sick
Sometimes they're
inside,
not ready. Sometimes
tired.
they're not. And when you start sharing things that are going on within them, they're in this place of, I don't want to carry that. Let's
I'm ready. I'm ready to let this go. I'm ready to stop being
Absolutely.
angry about this.
Yeah.
I understand that it's time to let it go, you know?
Yeah.
So, well, there's 9 minutes left. Great presentation, great conversation. I'm gonna stop the recording.